Okay, good morning, grade 7. So, yeah, we're going to start with the introduction to fishing. So, if you could jot down the unit topic and the date and the objective. Yeah, so today, with the first lesson, we'll define fishing and identify the different types of fishing. Now, some of you will have different levels of knowledge about this already. So, I'm going to start right from the beginning just with a definition of fishing. But first, you will notice you'll have this sheet. I would print out the sheets if you can, because then when it comes to revision, you'll be able to just go through each of those topics here that my cursor is showing and make sure that you're able to answer all of those questions before you go into the end of unit quiz, which should be next week or the week after. So yeah, as I said, we'll start at the beginning. Easy kind of idea of this. What is fishing? So it's that catching of marine animals or inedible marine products. So that so you're all probably aware of like the marine animals, so for eating, inedibles, so for maybe for jewelry, etc. Okay, and so I've got that definition here. I've just taken on there. Can you write down that definition? Um, so for food, earns a living for fishermen, recreation for many people, and the Bahamas has been trying to protect this fishing industry, okay? And we'll talk about this next week when we actually talk about the kind of how the government's tried to protect it. But here it mentions this exclusive fishery zone, okay? And we've got the Department of Fisheries who look after that. And we'll go into in a second about this difference between commercial and subsistent fishermen, okay? Um, and we'll go from there. Now, and it talks about the amount of money that is made each year, and this is not small amounts of money, and so it's helping the economy of the Bahamas. So we've got here, why is it important? So write down that subtitle: employment and jobs, food resource for eating, supports areas that can't farm, and it's also an export product, which will help with this. And we will talk about this a bit more another time about this idea, and I've mentioned it before, about that trade deficit, okay, between the difference between your imports and your exports, okay? You don't want to be importing too much in compared to how much you're exporting, okay? Um, so the types of fishing. So we've done about subsistence farming before, and now we're going to do about subsistence fishing. That's this small scale fishing. So you catch your fish for yourselves and your family. Now, if there's a little bit, you might sell to your local community, or you might trade it and swap, etc. But it's not really you're not really doing it for the opportunity to sell and make money. It's more just to like survive. Usually, these sort of fishermen will be like in shallow water, so from the shore to only about 45 miles out. Smaller vessels, equipment such as bully nets. Bully nets. I'm just hovering over these little pictures here. There's just a picture of a bully net and hooks and lines. Okay, these are sort of pelagic fish, so they're not near the bottom of the sea or right inshore, but they're a little bit further out and they swim by the surface, okay? And so examples of these like grunts and snappers. Now, so note down all of this. Make sure you put them down on your folder sheet or if you're typing it out. Commercial fishing, so large scale. Okay, it's maybe to make this really is just for making a profit. Usually done offshore, larger vessels. Okay, refrigerators are kept on board so that you can stay for a longer period out at sea and you can still keep that fish fresh. Okay, so they could be maybe going out for 1 week or even to 3 months. So nets and traps and impaling gear. Methods depend on like where they are and what fish they are catching. Okay, fish caught are more deep water. Okay, so you need more different kind of equipment for this. It's going to be more expensive, but then you'll be able to reap the benefits of that, such as grouper and crawfish. Okay, so copy down those notes. Then the final type, this is like fishing for pleasure, okay? That's sports fishing. So this is also a source of income for tourists. Power yachts are used, a rod and reel, usually for 1 day, and types of fish, maybe marlin and tuna. Some game fishermen catch, another word for sports fishing is game fishermen, catch the fish and then release it again, okay? So it's just in that process of catching it, really, for it, okay? So make sure you've got those notes down for that for lesson 1, okay? And you've read through these worksheets and you can highlight the different parts. Secondly, we're going to move on to is fishing in the Bahamas, okay? And we're going to find those fishing areas in the Bahamas. Now, you'll need your textbook here on page 131, okay? And I'm going to talk about, so fishing grounds in the tropics are generally is where there is the largest amount of food or fish, okay? Such as near river mouths or coastal areas, shallow bays and gulfs, and along reefs. And we'll come back to that bit about reefs later, okay? And so that's for, I would highlight that first sentence there, okay? For the Bahamas, the main sources of food are associated with the coral reefs, okay? And we'll come to that at the edge as the kind of the seafloor drops off and on the edge of these banks, okay? All of these areas provide food for fish, so the coral provides food for fish, and that's where the fish are going to locate, okay? And if you turn over the page, so while there aren't in the kind of, this is the fishing area in the Bahamas, okay? There are some common areas, okay? And the main for the Bahamas has a reef fishery, okay? So this is the third line down, so maybe highlight that, okay? And wherever these reefs have not been overfished, okay? Because if that happens, that's going to impact on the ecosystem there. Main areas where this can be found, like Abaco Keys, Exuma Keys, the Berry Islands, and so on, okay? And as I said, I'll go into the coral reefs now. So this bottom paragraph on page 132, coral reefs are these areas that provide habitats for many fish, okay? Now, this has been the case for most of the fish. Now, for lobsters, actually, we've got this idea of these lobster condos, okay? It's this idea of like a condominium, so where the lobsters are kind of live, and then they are kind of almost like an artificial way of catching the fish, okay? So they breed them in those areas. Third type of fishing ground is the seasonal schooling area, so where the fish will meet to mate. Now, there are problems here that might happen due to overfishing, that maybe the mating fish have all been taken, so that means that they can't reproduce in the future. And we'll come into this next week when we talk about marine protected areas, okay? So make sure you've highlighted those 2 pages, okay? Now, on the worksheets that I've given you, so where are the fish caught? So this is a repetition really of what was said there with a list of different areas. Fish are mainly caught on the banks in the area of the Berry Islands, etc. I can let you read through that yourself, okay? Banks are these shallow areas that provide the right conditions for plankton to grow, okay? And so that is where the fish are going to feed off those areas, so that's where the fish are attracted to it, so that's where you would fish in those areas. Now, I've got this map here that talks about these different areas, so we can see like grouper. Now, if we go back to last lesson, and we could talk about in those deeper sea areas, okay? So the sea will be deeper in these areas, so you're going to have those grouper, okay? And to go through, and it just has a different color key. You might want to open up that on your page and then zoom out, and so you can clearly see which areas have which type of fish, okay? We already spoke about the difference between subsistence and commercial fishing. Now remember the location difference. So which one was closer to inshore? So the subsistence from the shore to 45 miles out, while the commercial fishing has a greater distance, okay? So they're going to be going further out, okay? Now, so we've got for that, and then finally we're looking about where are fish sold, okay? Now you will know a lot of this already, so like the main areas where fishery products are sold include the Government Marine Products Market on Potters Quay, Montague Ramp, and a few fish shops, etc, okay? Now some of this edible fish is exported mostly to the United States due to its proximity, makes it easier and cheaper to send it there, okay? And so can you just go through and highlight those parts here, the main areas here, different methods there. Brilliant. Okay, so your assignment this week, now be careful, read the questions I've put on here, okay? I'm even going to change that there because I've just noticed that should say 2 there. Do not do questions 2 because you are supposed to do number 3. slideshow from current slides. So, yep, so complete questions 1, which is here. It's a nice multiple choice one. 3, true or false. 6, where is fish sold in the Bahamas? Just done that, so that should be nice and easy. And then talking about the materials they use, so you'd go back to lesson 1 for that, okay? Don't worry about 2, 5, and 8 yet, because I will want to go into that in a bit more detail next week. So upload those answers, so complete that on the worksheet, or if you're doing it on folder sheet, write them out. Don't just put pelagic A, because you won't be able to revise from that. So you'll need to type it out or write it out in the full sentence, or if you have the ability to print or scan it in or some different way, to be creative so that you have those notes in front of you, okay? So do that, upload it up. Any questions, just send me an email, okay?